My name is Harold Jenkins, and at 72 years old, I find myself mopping floors at a KFC. Not exactly how I imagined spending my golden years, but life has a way of rewriting your plans. 6 years ago, my daughter Sarah and her husband were killed in a car accident on Route 17, leaving their 8-year-old daughter, my Lily, with no one but me. Some days I still wake up thinking I'll get a call from Sarah about weekend plans, but then reality settles in like a cold draft. Took this job when my pension proved insufficient for raising a growing girl. Lily is 14 now, smart as a whip and kind in ways that remind me so much of her mother. Every morning when I put on this red and white uniform with KFC emblazoned across the chest, I remind myself that my pride is a small price to pay for her future. The manager, Darren, is a decent sort, 30-something with a business degree and enough humanity to look past my age when he hired me. Experience is worth something, he'd said during my interview, though we both knew janitors don't need much experience beyond knowing which end of the mop to hold. Still, I was grateful. The other employees, mostly kids working their first jobs, treat me with polite distance. I'm Mr. Harold to them, a fixture as permanent as the Colonel's smiling face on the wall. Most days blend together in a symphony of squeaking mop buckets and the persistent smell of fried chicken that clings to my clothes no matter how many times I wash them. Lily says she can smell when I'm home before she even sees me. But Fridays have become something else entirely, marked by the arrival of a man I've come to call the Friday customer. His real name is unknown to me, though I've heard the cashiers call him Mr. Peterson when they take his order. A man in his 40s, easily 300 pounds with a perpetual sheen of sweat that glistens on his forehead even in winter. He arrives every Friday at 6:15 p.m., precise as a German train, and orders the same meal: a 16-piece bucket, large fries, coleslaw, and a Diet Coke that seems mockingly inadequate next to the feast. It was 3 months ago when our paths first crossed. I was mopping near his usual booth, the corner one with extra space that accommodates his size, when he arrived. As he squeezed past, his shoulder bumped my mop bucket, sending dirty water across the freshly cleaned floor. "Watch where you put your stuff, old man," he muttered without looking at me. I said nothing, simply righted the bucket and began mopping again. In my 72 years, I've learned that some battles aren't worth fighting, especially when your granddaughter's welfare depends on your continued employment. The following Friday marked the beginning of what would become a ritual of humiliation. I was wiping down tables when he entered, earlier than usual. The restaurant was busy, the dinner rush in full swing. As I moved to clean a vacated table, Peterson deliberated sat at the one I had just finished. I watched from the corner of my eye as he unwrapped his meal, then deliberately pushed his coleslaw container to the edge of the table until it toppled over, splattering white dressing across the floor I had mopped not 10 minutes earlier. When I approached with my mop, he looked up at me, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Oops," he said, his voice dripping with insincerity. "Accidents happen." I kept my eyes down, focusing on the floor. "No problem, sir," I replied, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "Must be tough," he continued, tearing into a chicken thigh, "cleaning up after people at your age. Shouldn't you be retired or dead?" A laugh followed, meant for himself but loud enough that several customers turned to look. Heat crept up my neck, but I continued mopping, pretending I hadn't heard. As I finished and turned to leave, I felt something hit my back. A wadded-up napkin covered in sauce. "Missed a spot," Peterson called out. That night, I didn't tell Lily about the incident. When she asked why I was so quiet during dinner, I blamed it on arthritis in my knee. No need for her to know that her grandfather was being bullied like a schoolboy at recess. She had her own concerns, algebra tests and friend drama, and the science fair project on her desk that involved more beakers than I was comfortable with. The third Friday, Peterson escalated his game. I was prepared this time, making sure to stay away from his table until he left. But as the evening wore on, Darren asked me to clean up a spill in the men's room. I'd just finished and was rinsing out my mop when Peterson entered. The bathroom was small, and there was no way to avoid being in his path. "Well, if it isn't the ancient janitor," he said, his bulk filling the doorway. "Don't rush off on my account." "Just finished," I replied, keeping my voice neutral as I tried to wheel. My bucket passed him. He didn't move. "You know what I can't figure out," he continued as if we were having a casual conversation. "Why they keep dinosaurs like you around when there are plenty of young people who need jobs." I looked up then, meeting his gaze for the first time. His eyes were pale blue, almost colorless like shallow water. "I need this job, sir," I said simply. "For what? You've got one foot in the grave anyway." "For my granddaughter." Something flickered across his face then, surprised perhaps that I had a life beyond these walls, but it quickly disappeared, replaced by the same cold amusement. "Well, isn't that sweet?" he drawled. "Grandpa mopping floors for pocket money." He stepped aside finally, but as I wheeled my bucket past, his foot shot out, hooking the wheel. The bucket toppled, sending dirty water across the bathroom tile and onto my shoes. Peterson stepped back quickly, avoiding the splash. "Looks like you're not very good at your job," he said with mock concern. "Better clean that up before someone slips." After he left, I spent 20 minutes cleaning the bathroom floor again, my hands trembling with a mixture of rage and humiliation. When I emerged, Melissa, one of the younger cashiers, was waiting with a fresh mop head. "I saw him go in after you," she said quietly. "That guy's a real jerk." "It's nothing," I assured her, though we both knew it wasn't true. "You know, Mr. Harold, you could report him to Darren. That's harassment." I shook my head. "Best not to make waves. I need this job." Melissa looked like she wanted to argue, but instead handed me the mop head. "My mom's about your age," she said. "If someone treated her like that, I'd be furious." I smiled at her concern. "Your mother raised you right." That night, I told Lily I'd slipped at work when she noticed my damp shoes. Another lie to protect her from worrying. But as I sat helping her with history homework, I couldn't focus. Peterson's words echoed in my mind. 1 foot in the grave. Was that how the world saw me? As someone just waiting to die? I looked at Lily, her forehead creased in concentration as she read about the Civil War, and knew I had plenty to live for. The fourth Friday, I decided to try a different approach. Instead of avoidance, I would simply perform my duties with professionalism and dignity, regardless of Peterson's presence. Perhaps if I showed no reaction, he would grow bored with his game. I was sweeping near the entrance when he arrived, precisely at 6:15. Our eyes met briefly, and I nodded politely before returning to my task. For a moment, I thought my strategy might work. He proceeded to the counter without comment and placed his usual order. As he waited, I continued sweeping, gradually working my way toward the dining area. Peterson collected his tray and selected his regular booth. I kept my distance, focusing on my work while staying aware of his presence in my peripheral vision. The restaurant was busy that evening, families and after-work crowds filling most tables. I'd just finished cleaning up a spill when a young mother with 2 small children approached Peterson's table. "Excuse me," she said politely. "Would you mind if we share your booth? Everywhere else is full." Peterson looked up from his meal, annoyance evident on his face. "Yes, I would mind. Find somewhere else." The woman looked taken aback. "But you're sitting alone at a 4-person booth, and my children are tired." "Not my problem," he interrupted, taking a large bite of chicken as if to end the conversation. I saw the woman's face fall as her children looked on in confusion. Before I could think better of it, I approached. "Ma'am," I said, "there's a table in the corner that I just cleaned. It should be available." Peterson's head snapped up. "Well, if it isn't the geriatric janitor playing host now, stick to your mop. Old man, you're embarrassing yourself." The woman looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. "It's fine, thank you," she murmured, steering her children toward the table I'd indicated. "Nobody asked for your help," Peterson said to me after she left. "Don't you have some toilets to clean?" I gripped my broom handle tighter but maintained my composure. "Just trying to assist a customer, sir." "You know what would assist me?" he asked, leaning forward. "If you disappeared. Every time I come in here, I have to look at your pathetic old face. It ruins my appetite." "I apologize for the inconvenience," I replied evenly, though my heart was pounding. Peterson's eyes narrowed at my calm response. Then, deliberately, he reached for his drink cup and removed the lid. "You know, I'm not feeling well today," he said with a cruel smile. "Must be something I ate." In one quick motion, he knocked over his cup, spilling soda across the table and onto the floor. But this time, it wasn't an accident. He made a retching sound and spit directly into the puddle. "Oops," he said loudly. "Guess I really am sick. Better clean that up before someone catches something." Several nearby customers looked over in disgust. I stood frozen, broom in hand, as people began to whisper. The humiliation burned deeper than any previous incident. This wasn't just making a mess. It was a public degradation designed to reinforce that I was beneath him, worthy only of cleaning up his bodily fluids. I retreated to the supply closet for my mop bucket, my hands trembling with a mixture of rage and shame. As I filled the bucket at the utility sink, Melissa appeared beside me. "Mr. Harold, I saw what happened. That's so wrong." "It's nothing," I said automatically, though we both knew it was far from nothing. "It's not nothing. It's disgusting. You should take a break and I'll clean it up." I shook my head. "Thank you, Melissa. But no. If I let him chase me away from doing my job, he wins." When I returned to the dining area, Peterson was watching for me, a satisfied smile on his face as I approached his table with my mop and bucket. I cleaned up the mess without making eye contact, focusing instead on the task at hand, trying to block out the whispers from nearby tables. As I finished and turned to leave, Peterson spoke just loud enough for me to hear. "Same time next week, old-timer. I'll think of something special for you." The fifth Friday came with a sense of dread I couldn't shake. I'd considered calling in sick, but the thought of losing a day's pay when Lily needed new shoes for school made that impossible. Peterson had escalated his harassment each week, and I feared what something special might entail. "Harold, sorry, but someone knocked over a whole tray near the condiment station. It's a mess." Sure enough, the area was covered in ketchup, napkins, and spilled soda. I set to work, hoping to finish before Peterson arrived. I was almost done, when I heard his voice behind me. Well, look at that. The old man's right where he belongs, on his knees. I didn't turn around, just kept wiping up the last of the ketchup. "Hey, I'm talking to you," Peterson said, his voice louder. Several customers were watching now. I stood slowly, my knees protesting the movement, and faced him. "Can I help you, sir?" I asked, my voice steady despite the hammering in my chest. Peterson held his tray, loaded with his usual order. "Yeah, you can move out of my way. Some of us have food getting cold." I stepped aside, but as he passed, he tilted his tray, sending his Diet Coke tumbling directly onto the spot I'd just cleaned. The cup hit the floor, ice and dark liquid exploding outward, some of it splashing onto my pants. "Would you look at that?" Peterson said, feigning surprise. "Guess you'll have to start over." What happened next caught me by surprise. Jason, one of the cooks, emerged from behind the counter. "Sir, that was clearly deliberate," he said to Peterson. "I'm going to have to ask you to be more respectful of our staff." Peterson's face darkened. "Are you accusing me of something? It was an accident." "It didn't look like an accident to me or anyone else here," Jason replied. At 20, he was tall and confident, unintimidated by Peterson's size or attitude. "I want to speak to a manager," Peterson demanded. Darren appeared as if summoned. "I am the manager. Is there a problem?" Peterson launched into a complaint about disrespectful employees, but Darren cut him off. "Sir, I saw what happened. Mr. Jenkins is a valued employee, and we don't tolerate harassment of our staff. I'll have to ask you to take your food and leave." For a moment, Peterson looked stunned. Then his face contorted with anger. "Fine. Your chicken is overcooked anyway." He grabbed his food and stormed out, but not before fixing me with a glare that promised this wasn't over. I arrived early for my shift that day, hoping to speak with Darren about the situation, but he was in a meeting with the district manager. Instead, I confided in Melissa and Jason during our break. He said he has something special planned for me today. I told them, embarrassed to admit how much it had been weighing on me. Jason's face darkened. "This has gone too far. We should tell Darren to ban him." "On what grounds?" I asked. "Making messes? Being rude? Restaurants can't ban customers for that." "Harassment," Melissa insisted. "What he's doing is harassment." I appreciated their concern, but I knew how these things worked. Without witnesses willing to make formal statements or video evidence, it would be his word against mine, and corporate won't risk losing a regular customer over an easily replaceable janitor. They couldn't argue with that harsh reality. We returned to work, but I noticed them watching the entrance as closing time approached. At precisely 6:15, Peterson arrived, looking particularly pleased with himself. He carried a small paper bag along with his wallet, which immediately put me on edge. I was cleaning tables on the far side of the dining area, hoping distance might protect me. Peterson ordered his usual meal, then scanned the restaurant until he spotted me. With deliberate steps, he made his way to a table directly in my cleaning path, ensuring I would have to pass him to continue my work. For 20 minutes, I avoided that section, finding tasks elsewhere, but eventually, Darren asked me to mop the entire dining area floor before the evening rush. There was no avoiding Peterson any longer. As I approached with my mop and bucket, Peterson watched me with the air of a spider observing a fly entering its web. I kept my eyes down, focusing on the rhythmic movement of the mop across the tiles. "Hey, Grandpa," he called out when I was a few feet away. "I brought something for you." I looked up despite myself. Peterson was reaching into the paper bag he'd brought, his smile growing wider. "I was thinking about you this week," he continued, loud enough for nearby customers to hear, "about how hard it must be at your age to keep working. Thought you might appreciate this." From the bag, he pulled out an adult diaper. My heart sank as he held it up for everyone to see. "Figure you might need this soon, if not already. Hard to control those things at your age, right?" He laughed, enjoying the shocked expressions of those around us. "Consider it a gift." The cruelty of it struck me like a physical blow. This wasn't just making a mess or hurling insults. This was a calculated attempt to strip me of my last shred of dignity, to reduce me to nothing more than an object of ridicule and pity. I stood motionless, my knuckles white around the mop handle. For a moment, I considered striking him with it. Consequences be damned. As if sensing my thoughts, Peterson's smile widened. "What's wrong? Hit too close to home?" He tossed the diaper onto the floor between us. "Oops. Better clean that up." Something must have shown in my face, some flash of the rage and humiliation boiling inside me, because Peterson actually leaned back slightly. But then his confidence returned, bolstered by months of my passive acceptance. "You know, I was thinking," he continued, his voice dripping with mock concern, "does your family know you're still working? Or did they put you out to pasture and forget about you? Is there even anyone who'd notice if you didn't come home one day?" The question hit closer to home than he could have known. With Sarah gone, Lily was my only family. The thought of her growing up alone if something happened to me was my greatest fear. Before I could respond, Jason appeared beside me. At 20, he towered over both of us, his kitchen uniform splattered with the day's work. "Sir, I need to ask you to stop harassing our employee," he said, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of anger. Peterson's eyes widened in feigned innocence. "Harassing? I was just having a friendly conversation with the old-timer here." "That's Not what it looked like to me or anyone else, Jason replied. Please pick up that item you threw on our clean floor. Peterson's face flushed. I'm a paying customer. You can't talk to me like that. Actually, I can. And if you don't pick it up, I'll have to ask you to leave. Darren emerged from the back, drawn by the confrontation. What's going on here? Before Peterson could speak, an elderly woman at a nearby table spoke up. That horrible man was bullying. Your janitor, she said, pointing a gnarled finger at Peterson. Threw something at him and said the most awful things. I've been coming here for years and never seen such behavior. Several other customers nodded in agreement. Peterson looked around, suddenly aware that he had an audience, and not one that was amused by his cruelty. Darren's expression hardened. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You can't be serious, Peterson sputtered. Over a joke? Harassment isn't a joke, Darren replied firmly. Please take your food and go. For a moment, I thought Peterson might argue further, but faced with the united front of staff and customers, he seemed to deflate slightly. Fine, the chicken was dry anyway. He grabbed his tray and stood, his bulk seeming less intimidating now. As he passed me, he muttered, This isn't over, old man. After he left, several customers approached to express their support. The elderly woman patted my arm and told me she'd be writing to corporate about Peterson's behavior. Darren assured me he would document the incident and speak to the district manager about possibly banning Peterson from the restaurant. I appreciated their support, but Peterson's parting words lingered in my mind. I knew he would be back. Men like him didn't let perceived humiliations go unanswered. After closing, Darren called the evening staff together. I want to apologize, Harold, he said. We should have addressed this sooner. That customer has been causing problems for weeks. You didn't have to do that, I told him. I don't want to cause trouble. It's not trouble, Melissa interjected. That guy is horrible to you every week. We've all seen it. I looked around at their faces, Darren, Melissa, Jason, and the others, and felt something warm spread through my chest. They had noticed. They had cared. Thank you, I said simply. Don't thank us yet, Jason replied with a grim smile. He'll be back. Guys like that always come back. And he was right. The following Friday, the 6th week of Peterson's campaign against me, he returned earlier than usual. His face was set in smug satisfaction as he approached the counter. I was sweeping nearby and froze when I saw him. He ordered his usual meal but asked for it to go this time. As he waited, he caught my eye and smiled, a predator's smile that sent a chill down my spine. When his order was ready, he took the bag and walked toward the exit. As he passed me, he leaned in close. This isn't over, old man, he whispered. I come here every Friday, and I'll make sure you regret still being alive. I watched him leave, my heart racing. When I turned back, I found Melissa, Jason, and 2 other employees watching with concerned expressions. He threatened me, I told them, my voice steadier than I felt. What followed was unexpected. Darren called us all to the back office, away from customers' ears. This has gone far enough, he said. That man has been abusing Harold for weeks, and now he's making threats. We should ban him, Melissa suggested. Legally, we need more than just words, Darren replied, and corporate won't be happy about losing a regular customer without solid proof of misconduct. A silence fell over the room. Then Jason spoke, his voice low. What if he doesn't want to come back? What do you mean? I asked. I mean, Jason continued, what if his next meal here is so bad that he never wants to return? Melissa's eyes widened. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything, Jason replied carefully. I'm just saying that if someone were to receive food that was below our usual standards, they might take their business elsewhere. Darren looked uncomfortable. We can't deliberately tamper with food. That's illegal and against company policy. Not tamper, Jason clarified. Just ensure it's not up to our usual quality standards. I should have objected. In my 72 years, I'd always believed in taking the high road, but something had snapped inside me after weeks of Peterson's cruelty. "He comes at 6:15, I said quietly. "Always orders the same thing." 5 pairs of eyes turned to me in surprise. "Harold," Darren began, "we're not actually—" "I know," I interrupted. "We're just talking hypothetically." But we all knew it wasn't hypothetical. The next hour was spent in whispered conversation, planning what would later be referred to as the special order. I won't detail exactly what was discussed, some things are better left unsaid, but by closing time, there was a tacit understanding among the staff about what would happen when Peterson returned. I went home that night feeling a strange mixture of anticipation and guilt. Was I really going to be party to such an act? What example would that set for Lily? But then I remembered Peterson's words, regret still being alive, and my resolve hardened. Some people only understand consequences when they experience them firsthand. Today, Friday, I arrived at work with butterflies in my stomach. The day passed in a blur of routine tasks, but there was an undercurrent of tension among the staff. Knowing glances were exchanged. Jason spent extra time in the kitchen preparing for the dinner rush. Melissa seemed jumpy at the register. 6:10, Peterson arrived, right on schedule. I was mopping near the bathrooms, purposely keeping my distance. He didn't even look my way as he approached the counter, where Melissa greeted him with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The usual?" she asked. "What else?" Peterson replied dismissively. Melissa relayed the order to the kitchen, where Jason received it with a nod. What happened next, I only heard about later, as I stayed far from the food preparation area. According to Melissa, Jason prepared a special bucket just for Peterson, one that contained pieces that had been sitting under the warmer far too long, had fallen on the floor and been retrieved, or had been seasoned with extra ingredients that would never appear on the Colonel's secret recipe. The fries were the oldest, coldest batch available. The coleslaw had been left unrefrigerated for hours, and the Diet Coke, well, let's just say it contained more than carbonated water and artificial sweetener. When Peterson's order was ready, Melissa called his number with a cheerfulness that bordered on theatrical. He collected his bag without a word and found a table, despite having ordered the meal to go. It was clear he wanted to eat in the restaurant, perhaps looking for another opportunity to torment me. I kept my head down, focusing intently on mopping the same spot near the bathroom entrance. From the corner of my eye, I watched as Peterson opened his bucket and extracted a piece of chicken. The first bite seemed normal enough. He chewed thoughtfully, then frowned slightly. But hunger apparently overrode caution, because he took another bite, then another. It was when he reached for the coleslaw that things began to unravel. He took one mouthful, then immediately spat it back into the container. His face contorted with disgust as he grabbed his drink and took a large gulp, a decision he immediately regretted. Peterson's eyes bulged, and he sprayed the liquid across the table. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, standing so abruptly that his chair toppled backward. Darren appeared from the back, the picture of managerial concern. "Is something wrong with your order, sir?" Peterson's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. "This food is disgusting. The chicken tastes like it's been sitting out for days. The coleslaw is spoiled, and this drink tastes like—" He stopped, apparently unable to find words for what his drink tasted like. "I'm very sorry to hear that," Darren replied with practiced calm. "Let me get you a refund." "A refund? I want more than a refund. I want to know what kind of establishment serves food like this." By now, every customer in the restaurant was watching. Peterson's voice had risen to a bellow, and flecks of spittle flew from his mouth as he continued his tirade. I couldn't help but notice how different this was from our previous encounters. Now he was the one humiliated, the center of unwanted attention. "Sir, please lower your voice," Darren requested. "We have other customers." "I don't care about other customers," I care about being served garbage. I come here every Friday, and I expect decent food." "Well, perhaps you should reconsider your Friday tradition," Darren suggested coolly. "Clearly, our establishment isn't meeting your standards." Peterson stared at him, momentarily speechless. Then he grabbed a bucket of chicken and thrust it toward Darren. "Look at this. It's disgusting." Darren peered into the bucket with a show of confusion. "It looks like our standard product to me, sir. Perhaps you're having an off day." That was the final straw. Peterson's face contorted with rage. He slammed the bucket down, sending pieces of chicken skittering across the table and onto the floor. "I'm never coming back to this place again," he shouted, "and I'm reporting all of you to corporate." "That's your right, sir," Darren replied. "Your refund has been processed. Have a nice day." Peterson stormed out, leaving his meal scattered across the table and floor. As the door swung shut behind him, a strange silence fell over the restaurant. Then, slowly, several customers began to applaud. They had been witnesses to Peterson's behavior for weeks, I realized. They, too, had seen his cruelty. I approached the mess with my mop and bucket, but Jason stepped in. "I've got this one, Mr. Harold," he said with a wink. "You've cleaned up after him enough." Later, after closing, the staff gathered in the break room. There was a sense of shared conspiracy, of justice served. "He won't be back," Melissa declared confidently. "Not after that scene," Jason agreed. "His pride won't let him." Darren looked concerned despite our victory. "If he reports this to corporate—" "He won't," I interrupted. "Men like that don't admit when they've been bested. It would mean acknowledging weakness." They all looked at me with newfound respect, as if suddenly remembering that my 72 years had taught me something about human nature. "Mr. Harold," Jason said, "I've never seen you smile like that before." I hadn't realized I was smiling. "I suppose it feels good to stand up for yourself, even if others do the standing." Melissa reached out and squeezed my hand. "We're a team, here. Nobody messes with one of us without messing with all of us." As I walked home that night, I felt lighter than I had in months. The sky above was clear, stars punching through the darkness like tiny beacons. Lily would be waiting, probably, at her desk, struggling with algebra or lost in one of her novels. She'd ask about my day, and for once, I'd have a story to tell her. Edited, of course, to exclude the more unsavory details of the special order. When I opened our apartment door, Lily was indeed at her desk, but she wasn't studying. She was counting bills from an old cookie tin, the emergency fund I'd been building for her college education. My heart sank. "Grandpa." She quickly stuffed the money back into the tin. "I was just organizing." I set down my keys. "Lily, why are you counting the emergency money?" Her eyes, so like her mother's, couldn't meet mine. "Mrs. Abernathy said I could join the school trip to Washington, D.C., but the deposit is due Monday. I know you said we couldn't afford it, but I thought maybe if I used some of my birthday money and a little from the emergency fund." The trip cost $350, almost a week's salary for me. I'd already told her no twice, each time watching her brave attempt to hide her disappointment. Now, looking at her hopeful face, I felt the weight of Peterson's words from weeks earlier. Grandpa mopping floors for pocket money. That wasn't what this was. This was a man doing whatever necessary to give his granddaughter the opportunities she deserved. "We'll talk about it tomorrow," I said gently. "But the emergency fund is for emergencies only." She nodded, shoulders slumping slightly. "I know. I'm sorry. Everyone else is going." Later, after she'd gone to bed, I sat at our small kitchen table thinking about the day's events. Peterson's public humiliation, the staff's united front, the special order. There was a certain poetic justice to it all. And yet, looking at the calendar where I'd marked Lily's school events and the dates when bills were due, I wondered if justice was enough. Peterson was just one man. Tomorrow there would be other messes to clean. Other customers who saw me as nothing more than part of the furniture. And Lily would still miss her school trip, still have to wear second-hand clothes, still have to understand why we couldn't afford the luxuries her friends took for granted. But tonight, at least, I had stood up for myself. Or rather, I had allowed others to stand up for me. And that was something. A small victory in a series of defeats, but a victory nonetheless. I thought about Peterson, about how he'd made me feel small these past weeks, how he'd tried to reduce me to nothing more than an old man with a mop, but he'd failed to see the truth, that a man's worth isn't measured by his job or his age, but by the connections he builds, the love he gives and receives, and yes, sometimes by the quiet dignity with which he faces cruelty. The next morning, Saturday, I was surprised by a knock at our door. When I opened it, I found Melissa, Jason, and 3 other KFC employees standing in the hallway. "Mr. Harold," Melissa said, "can we come in for a minute?" Confused, I invited them inside our modest apartment. Lily emerged from her room, curious about the visitors. "We wanted to give you this," Jason said, handing me an envelope. "From all of us at KFC. Inside was $400 in cash and a card signed by every employee. For Lily's school trip," the card read, "and a little extra for new shoes. From your KFC family." A.T. stared at the money, unable to speak. Lily, reading over my shoulder, let out a small gasp. "We know about the Washington trip," Melissa explained. "You mentioned it a few weeks ago, and we've all seen how hard you work." "I can't accept this," I finally managed, though my hands clutched the envelope tightly. "It's not charity," Jason insisted. It's a bonus. For putting up with Peterson all these weeks without quitting or punching him in the face, which is what most of us would have done." Lily looked between us, confusion evident on her face. "Who's Peterson?" The others exchanged glances, and I realized I'd never shared the full extent of my workplace troubles with her. "Just a difficult customer," I said. "Nothing to worry about." "A monster," Melissa corrected, "who won't be bothering your grandfather anymore." Later, after they left and Lily was excitedly calling her friends about the Washington trip, I sat thinking about the unexpected kindness of my co-workers. People I had worked alongside for months but barely knew beyond their names had pooled their own limited resources to help my granddaughter. Peterson had tried to make me feel worthless, but these young people, many working their first jobs, none making much more than minimum wage themselves, had shown me I was valued, that I belonged. On Monday, I'll return to KFC. I'll put on my red and white uniform, pick up my mop, and clean floors for minimum wage plus tips. But I'll do it knowing that I'm not alone, that I'm valued. And when Friday comes again, for the first time in months I won't feel that knot of dread in my stomach. As for Peterson, I hope he finds another place for his Friday meals. And I hope, perhaps foolishly, that he learns something from this experience. About kindness, about respect, about the consequences of cruelty. But even if he doesn't, it doesn't matter. He no longer has power over my Fridays, or over me. My name is Harold Jenkins. I'm 72 years old. I mop floors at KFC to support my granddaughter. And today, I reclaimed more than just my dignity. I found my community,